What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. So I'm excited to bring to you guys today the Beretta APX Compact. Now this is new to the market for 2018, right around the NRA show, and when I heard that this gun was coming out I was very excited. Now if we think back to last year, I did review the full-size APX, and I must admit it took me a long time to review that firearm, and I saw it in the store quite a few times, but I would have a tendency to walk past it for a couple of reasons. It's a pretty big gun. It was a full-size duty gun, but also the APX definitely has some very unique styling to it, and it took a little while for me to warm up to it, but I finally did and dove in, and I was extremely impressed. It's a soft shooting firearm. We'll talk about the trigger and some of the ergonomics here in just a moment, but overall it was an impressive firearm. In fact, it certainly got a nod in my year-end review last year. So again, that brings us to today with the Compact, and I was very excited when Beretta announced that they were going to be doing a Compact, and there actually is another model on the way. Depending on when this video comes out, it might already be out or it might not. But I was very excited because, again, overall, certainly impressed with the APX line. Well, let's go ahead and knock some specs of this guy to the way, just so you can get kind of an idea of where it sits. The overall length is 6.97 inches. The height is 4.8 inches. The barrel length is 3.7 inches. The width, and I'll give you a good look at that, of course, it's 1.3 inches, so it is certainly a pretty stout firearm, and going along with that, the weight unloaded is 26.4 ounces. So again, not the smallest firearm in the world, but when we think about size, I'm going to go ahead and get my trusty Glock 19 out here, and it's a 19C, and I've got a threaded barrel in it right now, so I've been doing some suppressor work, more on that at a later time, but just to give you kind of an idea of where the APX Compact sits, and you'll notice it's a wide gun. I mean, now Glocks are unusually small for what you get, but that APX is pretty stout. However, I think they did it right with the Compact, and they called it a Compact smartly, and here's why. The magazine capacity on it, and you do get 2 steel magazines, they're 13 rounds, so it's a little bit unusual as compared to something like perhaps a Glock 26 or something like that would definitely be considered, or a lot of people consider it sort of the pinnacle of subcompact. This definitely is a bigger firearm, but a nice advantage of that is, if you'll notice, and I've got pretty average large hands, I wear large gloves, nothing special, I can get a full grip on this firearm. So it definitely sits somewhere between something like a Glock 26 and a Glock 19. It's kind of an interesting zone. There are more and more firearms that are going that direction. So I think it's great. You get some nice capacity, 13 rounds. The bigger full-size magazines do fit in this without a problem. Now it'd be nice to have a sleeve, and I'm sure those will come down the road at some point in time, but at least you have a little bit of magazine flexibility there as well. Now, in terms of features, a couple of things. One of the cool things about the APX, and I remarked about this in the full-size video, is the ergonomics. The ergonomics on the APX it's fantastic. Now, they've done some things a little bit differently this time. Now, you'll notice there actually is a back strap on this. This is a medium back strap. They have a large and a small as well, so you've got a little bit of grip modularity. Again, more on that here in a moment as well, but it's nice to be able to have a little bit of flexibility there. Now, the grip texture, I'll give you a really good look at that. It's actually, I would say this is medium aggressive on the back strap and pretty medium on the side, but it's really nice. I think it's a very attractive side strap there. But then the front strap, they've done that a little bit differently than the full size. It's actually aggressive. I mean, I would categorize that as definitely aggressive, but it's really nice because as you're shooting, this definitely gives you a really good bite. I mean, it really stays planted in your hand and it's not going anywhere. So ergonomics, certainly from a grip texture perspective, I think they've done a great job. Now, another thing that they did smartly for sure, and more manufacturers are doing this, they gave us a little bit of a lip on the magazine right here, and this is to help clear any malfunctions or anything like that, so you can strip that out very quickly and load in your next magazine or solve the problem, whatever it happens to be, and I think that's great. I love seeing that with firearms. Now, they've also done a little bit more of an undercut here under the trigger guard, which is great. Just allows your hand to get a little bit further up on the firearm, again, just to control some of that recoil and get a really comfortable grip. Same thing with the back of the frame as well. I mean, I think, again, ergonomics, I think it's pretty much spot on. I mean, it's very comfortable, sits nicely in the hand. Now, you'll notice it does have an accessory rail for lights, lasers, chainsaws, grenade launchers, whatever you want to throw on that, but it is a little bit short, so I'm not sure that it's going to take a lot of the lights that are out there on the market. So we'll have to kind of play around with that as time goes by. In terms of controls, a couple of things. The magazine release, it is certainly very good. It chucks these magazines out without question. It's really nice. It's great placement. It's got a little bit of texture on it as well. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that, but it's very smartly done, and it is reversible, I believe, just like its full-size brother. And if you know something different than that, be sure to leave a comment, as I know you will. And then it does have ambidextrous slide lock, slide release, because if you remember, this was actually one of the military trial entrants for the military sidearms. So one of the criteria, of course, was making it ambidextrous, so they definitely did that. All right, let's talk a little bit about disassembly on the APX Compact. Now, there is a disassembly lever, although it works just a little bit differently than some of the other firearms out there. You might be used to locking your firearm back, like maybe a Sig Sauer or a Smith & Wesson something, and then you would rotate your disassembly lever down and then slide your slide off, maybe pull the trigger, maybe not, depending on the gun. Well, that's not the case with the APX. So a couple of different things going on here. A couple of buttons on the right side of the firearm. First, this one right back here, this is actually a decocker button. You can take something like a punch or the tip of maybe a 223 or 5.56 rounds, something like that. You can depress that little button and that will decock the firearm or make the trigger essentially useless. But that means you won't have to pull the trigger when you disassemble it. That sort of thing doesn't really bother me. I don't mind pulling a trigger because I know that the gun is unloaded. You always safety check it first. But there is also another button right here, and this one is kind of interesting. I haven't really seen this on other firearms, at least in the striker fired world, but all you have to do is depress this little button, and what's going to happen, it's always fun to do this on camera, it's going to make that lever pop out just a little bit, and then you'll rotate it, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger, and then the whole gun pops apart. Now, it has all of the standard components that you would find in any normal firearm. These days, you've got your slide, your barrel, your guide rod and spring assembly, and your frame. Now, the slide is, I'll tell you what, it's extremely user-friendly. It's very clean in there. Now, mine's a little dirty because I went to the range earlier, but they've made it so it's very easy to maintain, very easy to clean, that sort of thing. It's very nice. And of course, your barrel, your guide rod is dual captive. It is steel, which is kind of nice. And then your frame, one unique thing about the frame, this is actually a modular firearm. In other words, the trigger module or component in here will actually come out. You've got a couple of steps you need to take, but then it'll come out and it is the serialized part. So you could, in theory, drop it in other frames and other slides and barrels, that sort of thing, and have basically one serialized firearm, but quite a few different variants or options of that firearm. It's a really cool trick, and I hope that more manufacturers do that. Now, to reassemble, everything, again, goes back just like pretty much any other standard firearm, not anything terribly exciting. Then we get our slide and frame back together. There we go. And we will check for functionality, and we are good to go. So that is your disassembly. That's it from a frame perspective. Now, when we get to the slide, again, I mentioned early on in the video that one of the interesting things about the Beretta APX, of course, is the slide serrations, and I would say just the overall look of the slide. And I think people either love it or they hate it, but I must admit, in terms of practicality, you can grab this thing. Of course, you can't really grab it there, but you can basically grab it anywhere on the firearm and you can make that slide work. And it actually is really nice. Now, I know that this gun didn't necessarily do as well on the elemental tests with Military Arms Channel, and I'm sure some others have done that as well. There's a little bit of a gap here between the frame and the slide. But for everyday use, for the majority of us that aren't going to be running around in all of those different elements, it's going to do just fine. So don't use those videos as entertainment more than anything else, or at least I would say so. But again, the slide features rather are pretty interesting for sure. But I've gotten used to it. I actually think they're pretty cool. Now the sights right here, these are going to be a metal 3-dot white setup right here. The sights are fine. I mean, they're nothing special, nothing great. I'd love to have some high-vis sights on this. Again, more on the shooting here in just a little while. But again, these will work just fine. They've got a little bit of a ledge for one-handed manipulation. So again, I think Beretta did a good job with that. There's definitely some value in there. And then the only other interesting thing about the APX, the entire APX line, you'll notice there's a little tab that sticks up right there at the back of the slide, and this is all just part of the inner workings of the trigger and all of that. And it goes down when you manipulate the slide, of course, and then we'll do this again. It doesn't bother me a bit. First, and I do have it sticking up, of course, you don't see it when you're shooting it, so it's not going to be a distraction whatsoever. And in terms of it somehow being caught on something or damaged, I think the likelihood is pretty small. I haven't heard any tales of that or anything. So, and some other guns have this feature as well, so I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it is certainly unusual as compared to some of the other polymer striker-fired firearms out there. In terms of shooting, the APX Compact is a lot of fun to shoot. Now, I went to the range and I put 200 rounds through it, so that's a little bit less than I normally do for an inaugural run. However, you'll probably notice in some of the shooting footage, I'm a little shaky. I made a huge mistake and had a heroic dose of coffee before I went shooting, so I had the caffeine jitters pretty much the entire morning, so I had to laugh about that a little bit, and some other people at the range laughed at me as well. We had a good time with that. But aside from these shakes, the gun really performed very well. Now, I had to go back and watch a little bit of shooting footage with the original APX full size, and I noticed both of them are very similar in that I shoot them both to the right, generally speaking. Now, that's me. That's perhaps trigger control, a little bit of grip adjustment that I need to do, and nothing about the gun whatsoever. But it's very consistent. So I remember having to take the APX full size back to the range maybe 3 or 4 other times to really hone in on it and dial it in a little bit more and get more comfortable. I'm sure I will have to do the same with the compact, but again, shooting wise, it's a lot of fun. It was a really good time at the range, and aside from the shakes, it definitely performed very well, and I attribute that again to a couple of things. Ergonomics, the grip texture, I mean, that grip texture is absolutely fantastic, but aside from that, the trigger on the APX. Now, we'll take a look at this here for a moment. You'll notice it's a standard safety lever like you would find on a lot of the modern polymer firearms out there. And then the trigger otherwise is actually pretty flat. Now, I've noticed, however, with both of these that the trigger lever doesn't sit completely flat with the trigger. Now, it doesn't bother me a bit because I wrap my finger around. I've got long fingers, so this is much more comfortable for me to shoot, so it does really well. But using the pad of your finger, you're going to feel that bar a little bit. Hopefully some aftermarket companies like APX, hope you're watching, might be an opportunity there, but hopefully somebody will come out with some other triggers and flatten that up just a little bit more. That might really dial this up to 11, but otherwise, again, it feels just fine in terms of the trigger pull. Now, you'll notice that trigger sits pretty far back in the trigger housing, another thing that I find to be quite an advantage because that take up, that was it. You have to, you'll blink and you miss it. Right there, that's the take up. It's at the wall, and there's your break, and it's a nice break. It's crisp, it's clean, and then your reset right there, and then back out to the start. This trigger does not travel very far either way. It's coming in about 6 pounds, so it's not the lightest trigger out there, but it's really smooth. And again, without a lot of travel, I mean, you can really make this gun go, and it will work just fine. So trigger out of the box, I think the Beretta APX line is really good. Probably not the best out of the box, of course, but definitely very good. So overall, what do I think of the APX Compact? So far, I've been really impressed. Now, again, it's got some unusual and unique styling. I know it's not for everybody, but I've gotten used to that, and I actually kind of like it. It's sort of a standout a little bit. I'll be excited if they come out with some different color frames because it does have that trigger module in it, so you can kind of decorate it or make it your own. Hopefully, they'll come out with a neat FDE or gray or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. But again, otherwise, a lot of fun, a lot of good ergonomics, good trigger. It just is a really solid performer. So, guys, be sure to sound off down below. Let me know what you think of the Beretta APX Compact. If you've got some experience with this or the full size, I love hearing about stuff like that and engaging in good conversation with you guys. Thanks so much for joining me as always, and I will see you next time.